The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days when they found the boot in the creek. It was lodged between two thick stones beneath the county bridge, mud-caked, half-buried, and swollen with water. To most people, it looked like trash washed down from the mountains after the storm. But to the deputy who spotted it, the color, navy blue with a faint white logo, was the same one printed on every missing poster in town. The boot belonged to 19-year-old Evan Miller, a sophomore at Pine Hollow College, who had vanished during spring break 2 weeks earlier. At the time, no one had seen or heard from him since a Friday night bonfire just outside the woods that bordered the campus. There'd been rumors that he'd left with friends, that he'd driven to Nashville for the weekend, that he'd had too much to drink and passed out somewhere off the road. But the truth was quieter, slower to show itself. It moved like the creek that carried that boot, cold, deliberate, and steady towards something darker. The call came in to the Pine Hollow Sheriff's Office on a fog-heavy Monday morning. By then, every wall in town seemed to bear Evan's face. Missing college student. Last seen. March 12th, 11:45 p.m. The man who reported the find was the same one who'd been out there every morning since the search began. His name was Mark Jennings, a 31-year-old volunteer firefighter and one of the first to sign up for the community search team. Could be his, he told the responding officers, standing under a dripping raincoat, his voice barely above the sound of the creek. Thought I'd better call it in before the current takes it further. He looked exhausted. Mud streaked up his boots, a week's worth of stubble, eyes hollow from too little sleep and too much effort. He'd become something of a fixture in the search effort, the man who knew the trails, who mapped the creek beds, who brought coffee to the searchers before dawn. When the officers bagged the boot, Mark stood back with his hands in his pockets, rain pooling in the brim of his cap. "You think it means he's gone?" he asked quietly. "Hard to say," one of them replied. "But it's something." Mark nodded. "That's what I keep telling myself. At least it's something." The discovery reignited the search. Dozens of volunteers fanned out along the creek's path, combing through underbrush, overturned logs, and flooded ditches. Helicopters swept low over the woods, their blades cutting through the fog like restless insects. Reporters returned to town, setting up on the courthouse lawn to film updates for the evening news. And through it all, Mark was there, front and center. Always first to arrive, last to leave. He'd known Evan casually, he said, through church. Helped him move into the dorms once. Thought of him like a younger brother. When the cameras turned toward him, he spoke with practiced humility. "We're not giving up," he told Channel 9 News. "This town looks after its own." By the end of that week, the boot had been confirmed as Evan's. DNA, they said. A small victory, though it deepened the unace that already hung over Pine Hollow. Because finding one shoe meant someone had walked or been carried out there. And the rest of him was still missing. Evan's parents had driven in from Knoxville the day after he vanished. His mother, Diane, moved like someone underwater, slow, deliberate, suspended in shock. His father, Roger, tried to keep busy, working side by side with the search teams, gripping the handle of a borrowed shovel until his knuckles split. In one interview, Diane said softly, "Evan called that night. He said he was coming home early, that he'd packed up, that he was done with the semester." But he never arrived. The phone records later confirmed he had made that call from a gas station about 12 miles out of town. Security footage showed him alone, buying a soda and a pack of gum. At 11:57 p.m., he walked out toward his car, a faded silver Civic, and vanished into the dark. That Civic was found 4 days later, parked behind a shuttered diner off Route 14. No signs of struggle. No fingerprints except his own. When investigators searched the area, they found tire tracks leading from the lot into the woods, though the rain had softened most of the impressions. Mark Jennings was among the first to volunteer to check that stretch. He brought a drone, maps, even a thermal scanner borrowed from the fire department. He was organized, one deputy later said. Almost too organized, like he'd done this before. The town held vigils. Students lit candles in front of the campus library. Local businesses printed flyers, offered reward money. But as days turned to weeks, hope thinned into ritual. People began whispering theories, the kind that fill the silence when truth refuses to show itself. Some said Evan had run away. Others whispered about drugs, a gambling debt, a secret relationship. And still, Mark kept searching. Every evening after his shift at the firehouse, he'd head back into the woods, flashlight in hand, rain or shine. Deputy Torres, who oversaw the search teams, once asked him, "What drives you, Mark? Most folks give up after a week." Mark just shrugged. "I've seen too many families not get answers. I figure if I can help stop that, why wouldn't I?" Torres nodded, but couldn't shake a strange unease. There was something about the man's calm, a steadiness that felt unnatural amid so much grief. Then, one night in April, nearly a month after Evan's disappearance, a break came. A pair of hikers spotted something while cutting through a section of forest about 6 miles from campus. A strip of blue fabric, tangled in the branches of a downed tree near a drainage ravine. When deputies arrived, they realized it was a piece of a jacket sleeve, torn at the elbow. And beneath the dirt and roots nearby, they found more. Bones, partial remains. It was late, the air heavy with the smell of rain-soaked pine. Deputies taped off the area as forensics arrived from Nashville. By dawn, it was confirmed. The remains were human. By nightfall, dental records matched. It was Evan Miller. The entire town seemed to stop moving that day. Classes at Pine Hollow were canceled. The local diner closed early. On television, reporters spoke of a community in mourning and a tragedy that has shaken this quiet Tennessee town. At the sheriff's office, investigators began what they called the secondary phase. With Evan found, the question turned to how and why. Autopsy results showed blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds. He hadn't drowned. He'd been killed before being buried. The site where his body was found was remote, accessible only by old logging roads and hiking trails. Few people knew the way, but Mark Jennings did. He'd mapped every inch of that terrain during the search. When he heard the news, he showed up at the station again, hat in hand, eyes red. "If there's anything else I can do," he said, "anything at all." The sheriff thanked him, but told him they'd be scaling back volunteer operations. Still, Mark lingered, asked about the evidence, the timeline, whether they'd found tire tracks near the body. Something about his interest began to feel off. 2 weeks later, the sheriff's office received a call from a young woman named Lila Crane, a junior at Pine Hollow. She said she'd known Evan from class, and that about a week before he vanished, he'd told her something strange. "He said there was a guy who kept showing up at the rec center," she explained over the phone. "Older, maybe 30s. Said he worked at the firehouse. He thought it was weird, because the guy kept asking about his schedule, when he'd be leaving for spring break, stuff like that." When deputies showed her a lineup of photos, she pointed to one immediately. "That's him," she said. "That's the guy Evan was talking about." The photo was of Mark Jennings, Detectives brought him in the next morning. At first, it was casual, a conversation, not an interrogation. Mark sat with his hands clasped, voice calm. "Yeah, I talk to Evan sometimes. Kid was a good head on his shoulders, always polite." "Why?" The detective leaned back. "You remember where you were the night of March 12th? Mark didn't flinch. "Firehouse till about midnight. Then home." "Why?" "We checked the logs. You clocked out at 10:42. He blinked slowly. "That right? Maybe I misremembered. Long night." The detective slid a photo across the table, the torn sleeve from the jacket. "This was found near his body. Know what's strange? The fibers on it matched a particular kind of nylon. The same type used in search vests, the kind the fire department hands out." For the first time, Mark's composure shifted, just slightly, a tightening of the jaw. "Lot of those out there," he said evenly. "Anyone could have lost one." The detective nodded. "You're right. Anyone could have." Then he leaned forward. "Except we found your initials on the tag." What happened next never made it to the local news in full detail. Only fragments filtered through court records and leaked reports. Investigators got a warrant for Mark Jennings's truck. Inside, they found a roll of plastic tarp, rope, and a small shovel, all with trace soil consistent with the burial site. DNA from the shovel handle matched Evan's blood. When confronted, Mark denied everything at first, then asked for a lawyer. But later, after 18 hours in holding, he broke. He told them it was an accident, that he and Evan had argued that night near the gas station. Something about money, about a favor owed. He said he lost his temper, hit Evan with a tire iron, panicked, and buried him before dawn. The sheriff who took the confession said Mark never cried, never raised his voice, just spoke in a flat, steady tone, as if describing a routine shift at work. When news broke that the man who'd led the search had been the killer all along, Pine Hollow collapsed into disbelief. The same neighbors who'd prayed beside him, who'd eaten at the same diner tables, now refused to speak his name. Parents stopped letting their kids join the volunteer programs. The fire department closed for restructuring. And in the center of it all, Diane and Roger Miller sat in a courtroom, staring at the man who'd shaken their hands, hugged them after vigils, and promised to bring their boy home. He had, just not alive. At sentencing, Mark said little, only that he didn't mean for it to happen, that he just wanted to help. No one understood what that meant. But one investigator, reviewing old footage from the early search days, noticed something chilling. In one of the clips, a wide shot of volunteers combing the creek, Mark stood off to the side, staring into the water. And right beneath where he stood, though no one noticed it at the time, was the faint outline of that blue boot, the one he found days later, as if he'd been watching all along, as if the search itself was never about finding Evan. It was about making sure no one else did. The courthouse steps were lined with cameras that morning, local reporters, Nashville affiliates, even a few national outlets that had caught wind of the volunteer killer case. Rain slicked the old concrete, and flashes from cameras bounced off puddles like lightning in shallow water. Inside, the air was heavy with that strange mix of grief and curiosity that always follows a small-town tragedy made big. Mark Jennings, dressed in a wrinkled orange jumpsuit, was led into the courtroom with his wrists cuffed and his eyes half lowered. He didn't look like the villain people wanted him to be. He looked like any man you'd pass at the hardware store. Quiet, polite, invisible. But for the families in Pine Hollow, there was no mistaking the truth now. He wasn't the hero of the search. He'd been hiding in it. The trial began with what the press called meticulous restraint. The prosecution didn't open with drama. They opened with patience. They built Mark piece by piece, the firefighter, the rescuer, the man everyone trusted, until that image became too real, too perfect. Then they began to dismantle it. They played the footage from the search operations. Mark kneeling beside deputies, handing out flashlights, his calm voice guiding volunteers through the map. At one point, a reporter asked him, "Do you think we'll find him?" And Mark's answer, recorded on live television, echoed through the courtroom. "I think we already have. We just don't know it yet." The jury shifted uncomfortably. The defense objected, called it a coincidence of phrasing, but the damage was done. That single line, replayed over and over again in the months leading up to trial, had become the eerie centerpiece of the case. To some, it sounded prophetic. To others, like a confession hiding in plain sight. Evan Miller's parents sat in the front row every day. Diane clutched a handkerchief that had long lost its color from tears. Roger just stared forward, unmoving, jaw locked tight. They didn't speak to reporters, didn't give statements. But one night, outside the courthouse, a journalist caught Diane leaving through a side door and asked, "Do you think justice will help?" She stopped, voice raw but steady. "Justice won't bring my son back," she said, "but maybe it'll stop someone like him from pretending to be good." The deeper investigators went into Mark Jennings's past, the stranger it became. There were whispers from neighboring counties, unsolved disappearances from volunteer operations where he'd been present, a missing hiker in Polk County, a runaway reported last seen near a search base in Bradley. Nothing concrete, no evidence tying him directly. But patterns. And patterns were how detectives learned to listen when the truth stayed quiet. One file in particular caught their attention, a 2016 case from a nearby town called Dry Creek. A teenage boy, Caleb Foster, vanished after attending a summer fire safety program. Mark had been one of the instructors. The search lasted a week. Mark was the first to report finding Caleb's backpack near a quarry. It was later ruled an accidental fall. No autopsy ever challenged that. Now, nearly a decade later, prosecutors started connecting timelines, travel routes, and incident reports. Every time someone went missing, Mark was there, in uniform, clipboard in hand, leading the charge to find them. But to the jury, evidence mattered more than theory. The prosecution's physical evidence was strong. Soil samples, blood traces, DNA on the shovel. Yet what gripped the courtroom was not the science, it was the psychology. Dr. Halpern, a forensic psychologist, testified that Mark's behavior fit a rare but documented pattern. Hero syndrome. Some individuals, he explained, manufacture crises in order to be part of the solution. They want recognition, purpose, validation. The lines between helper and harmer blur. They convince themselves that being the savior, even to a tragedy they caused, makes them important. The room went silent. He paused before adding, "But in this case, the savior wasn't trying to help anyone. He was trying to control the story." When it was Mark's turn to take the stand, his attorney advised against it. But Mark insisted. He wanted to set the record straight. He sat there under the fluorescent lights, posture straight, voice calm. That same eerie composure he'd shown since his arrest. "I didn't mean to kill him," he said. "It was an accident. I hit him once. He fell. I panicked." The prosecutor leaned forward. "And buried him in the woods?" Mark's eyes flicked toward the floor. "I didn't know what else to do." "You joined the search to cover it up?" Mark hesitated. "No, I joined the search because I wanted to make it right." The prosecutor's voice sharpened. "Make it right? By pretending to look for the body you hid?" Mark didn't answer. His silence filled the room like static. It wasn't guilt in his eyes. It was pride. Quiet, calculated pride. Later that afternoon, the prosecution presented a piece of evidence that changed the tone entirely. A series of text messages recovered from Evan's phone. They'd been sent the night he disappeared, right before midnight. The messages were to an unsaved number. "Evan, you sure this is safe?" "Unknown. I told you, no one will see us. You'll get what you need." "Evan, this is about the fire report, right? You said you had something." "Unknown. Meet me at the old diner. Park in back." The phone never sent another message. Investigators traced the number. It was a prepaid phone purchased 2 days earlier from a gas station near the firehouse. Security footage showed one customer at the counter that day, Mark Jennings. That revelation hit like a storm. Evan hadn't been a random victim. He'd been lured. Theories began to spread that Evan had uncovered something at the firehouse, maybe an accident report Mark wanted buried. Others thought Mark had seen something in him, a reflection of someone he couldn't control. But what prosecutors suggested was simpler and far darker. Mark had wanted to be the hero again. He'd created the disappearance, then spent weeks pretending to solve it. Outside the courthouse, the town turned into something unrecognizable. Businesses hung black, ribbons in their windows. Students painted murals of Evan on the side of the library. At night, the campus grew eerily quiet. Locals stopped volunteering for anything involving emergency work. When sirens rang out, people closed their curtains. It was as if the idea of help itself had been poisoned. Sheriff Grady, the man who'd led the early investigation, said it best during a press interview. "You don't come back from something like this. You trust a man to find your son, and it turns out he's the reason you lost him. That kind of betrayal. It changes what this town means." The jury deliberated for 2 days. On the afternoon of the 2nd, the foreman stood and read the verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. A collective exhale rippled through the courtroom. Grief, relief, disbelief, all tangled together. Mark showed no visible reaction. He only turned his head slightly toward Diane and Roger Miller, as if to say something he'd been waiting to say all along. But Roger didn't look at him. The bailiffs moved in. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. As they let him out, Mark spoke softly to the deputy beside him. The microphones barely picked it up, but one reporter caught part of it on a boom mic. He said, "They'll need someone to lead the next search." For most, that would have been the end. But for investigators, it was only the beginning. Because as the FBI reviewed Mark's history for federal record consolidation, a disturbing pattern emerged. Between 2012 and 2022, there were 7 reported missing person cases across 3 counties, all during or near volunteer search operations involving fire departments or community groups. 3 were ruled accidents. 2 remain unsolved. 2 were later found, both in wooded areas, both within 5 miles of where Mark's volunteer units had been stationed. In one case, tire impressions from a truck matched a similar make and model to his. The Bureau quietly reopened the files. But by then, Mark was locked in a state facility, his letters censored, his phone calls monitored. or so they thought. In early 2024, a correctional officer at the Tennessee State Penitentiary noticed something strange. Mark had been receiving letters, dozens, from women who'd watched his case on TV. They called him the misunderstood hero, some even enclosed photographs. But one envelope, postmarked from a nearby county, wasn't from a stranger. It was from a volunteer coordinator named Samantha Lee, who'd helped organize a new search program for missing persons, the same kind Mark had once run. Inside the envelope was a short note. "We're starting again. In Dry Creek this time. Wish you could see it." Beneath it, a printed flyer. Community Search Initiative, led by Volunteer Coordinator S. Lee and Advisor M. Jennings. Remote consultation. Someone had been using his name. Or, with his permission. When the FBI contacted Samantha, she initially denied any connection. But when agents searched her computer, they found multiple encrypted emails sent from a restricted network, the prison's internal messaging system. Mark had found a way to communicate through a clerical worker he'd befriended. He was mentoring volunteers again. From inside prison, agents shut down the channel within a week, but the damage was already done. The search group had been operating for 3 months before they caught it. And in that time, a young man named Travis Grant, a 20-year-old volunteer, had gone missing near Dry Creek, the same place Caleb Foster had disappeared years before. The headlines returned. "Search for missing volunteer echoes, notorious Pine Hollow case. Convicted killer linked to new disappearance." In Pine Hollow, Diane Miller turned off her TV for good. She said she couldn't bear hearing his name again. But privately, she began collecting every article, every file, every record about the new disappearance. Because somewhere deep down, she knew. Killers like Mark Jennings didn't stop because of prison walls. They stopped when the story ended. And his story wasn't over yet. The footage from the Dry Creek operation looked eerily familiar. Volunteers in orange vests, headlamps cutting through fog, dogs barking in the dark. A community searching for one of its own. On paper, it was everything good-hearted towns were supposed to do. But to investigators who'd seen Pine Hollow, it looked like déjà vu with blood under its skin. Because once again, a young man was missing. And once again, the man at the center of it all was Mark Jennings, this time from behind bars. The FBI dispatched Special Agent Rowan Pierce, a 12-year veteran specializing in behavioral analysis. He'd been one of the few agents to study Mark's case file in depth after the conviction. When he arrived in Dry Creek, he immediately noticed the same eerie patterns. The media frenzy, the desperate volunteers, the worshipful tone with which everyone spoke about Mark, as if prison had turned him into some mythic martyr. Samantha Lee, the coordinator who'd written to him, had built the entire operation around Mark's methodology. She used his old maps, his search patterns, even his color-coded volunteer zones. When Agent Pierce asked her about it, she smiled nervously. "He saved lives," she said. "I know what he did was awful, but he also found people. Families got closure because of him. We just wanted to continue that." Pierce nodded slowly. "And now, another volunteer's gone." Her smile faltered. "That's not because of Mark." Pierce looked at her. "No, but it always starts with someone saying that." The missing volunteer, Travis Grant, had been a college sophomore, eager, talkative, the kind who signed up for every community initiative he could find. He'd joined Samantha's group to help locate a missing hiker, in the Dry Creek woods. The group had spent 3 days combing the forest. On the fourth, a thunderstorm forced them to suspend operations. When they regrouped the next morning, Travis's truck was still in the parking lot, keys in the ignition, radio still playing. His phone was found in the mud about 50 yards from the trailhead. The last photo taken showed nothing unusual, just a stretch of pine trees and fog. But GPS metadata revealed something that shouldn't have been possible. The coordinates of that photo matched the same general area where Caleb Foster's backpack had been found in 2016. The case connected to Mark's first hero discovery. Same woods, same radius, same kind of disappearance. It wasn't coincidence anymore. It was choreography. When Pierce returned to Nashville to review the prison correspondence, he discovered that Mark's consulting wasn't casual. The letters were coded with geographic coordinates, disguised as random Bible verses. For instance, Matthew 4:19, translated into 4-19, corresponding to a segment of latitude near Dry Creek. He'd been directing search routes from inside his cell. Pierce met with the warden, who confirmed Mark had recently been transferred to minimum security medical confinement for good behavior. Good behavior, Pierce repeated under his breath. He's running field ops from a prison, and you call that good behavior? The warden frowned. We had no idea. He's quiet, polite, reads the paper, tutors inmates. Pierce looked out the office window toward the gray prison yard. That's how he gets them. He builds the trust first. Meanwhile, media coverage exploded. Is the volunteer killer still controlling the search? Dry Creek vanishing raises questions about justice system oversight. The FBI tightened restrictions on Mark's mail and visitors, but it was already too late. Someone, maybe Samantha, maybe others, had absorbed his ideology. They weren't just following his old playbook. They were writing new chapters. When Pierce finally met Mark face to face at the penitentiary, he didn't start with questions. He started with silence. Mark sat across from him, posture perfect, eyes clear. Prison hadn't broken him. If anything, it had refined him. Pierce finally said, "You know why I'm here?" Mark smiled faintly. Dry Creek. Pierce nodded. Travis Grant. Ah, Mark said, as if tasting the name. The eager one. I liked him. Pierce leaned forward. You never met him. Mark tilted his head. Didn't have to. The air between them turned cold. Pierce unfolded one of the coded letters and slid it across the table. You're still running searches. Mark studied the paper calmly. People ask for guidance. I give it. Doesn't make me guilty. Someone's dead or missing every time you give guidance. Mark's voice softened. They'd be missing anyway. I just help people find meaning in it. Pierce stared at him. You don't help anyone. You orchestrate chaos so you can watch it unfold. Mark smiled wider. And yet you came here because you need me to understand it. Outside the interview room, Pierce told his partner, he's not done. He's teaching. What, like a cult? Worse, Pierce said. He's building disciples, the kind that think tragedy makes them significant. A week later, hikers discovered something in the Dry Creek woods. A red vest, the kind volunteers wore during the search, folded neatly beneath a fallen log. Inside the pocket, wrapped in plastic, was a note. To find is to be found. The handwriting matched samples from Mark Jennings. But here was the impossible part. The note's ink was too fresh. It hadn't weathered the rain. Someone had placed it there after the storms. Someone outside the prison. When the FBI questioned Samantha again, she looked gaunt. Pale skin, trembling hands. Pierce asked gently, "Who's still out there, Sam?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Who's still following him?" She swallowed hard. "He said we could help people, that we could fix what the police always get wrong. We weren't supposed to hurt anyone." Pierce leaned in. "You've been visiting him?" She nodded slowly. "Every week. He told me where to look, what to mark. He said the woods remember the ones who care." Pierce whispered, "And Travis? Did you see him that last night?" She broke. "He wanted to quit. He said he didn't like what Mark was asking us to do. He said it didn't feel like searching anymore. It felt like hunting." Her voice cracked. "He said he was going to tell someone." Pierce's jaw tightened. "And then he disappeared." Samantha sobbed. "Mark said sometimes people have to go missing to be seen." By early summer, the search for Travis turned into a containment effort. The woods were cordoned off. Drones scanned thermal signatures. K-9 units swept ravines. On June 9th, they found a clearing, freshly dug soil beneath a tangle of vines. Inside, buried in a shallow grave, lay Travis Grant, wrapped in the same style of tarp found in the Pine Hollow case. A pattern had come full circle, but this time, something else was buried with him, a laminated volunteer badge with Samantha Lee's name on it. Pierce was at the scene when they uncovered it. The deputy beside him whispered, "You think she did it?" Pierce shook his head slowly. "She didn't. He did." The deputy frowned. "He's in prison." Pierce looked toward the trees. "That doesn't stop someone like him. He just found a new pair of hands." That night, Pierce requested an emergency transfer for Mark Jennings. Full isolation, no mail, no visitors, no contact privileges. The Bureau approved it, but before they moved him, a guard found something disturbing in his cell. Beneath his bunk, carved into the concrete with a spoon handle, were 6 words. "Every search needs a beginning." And taped beside it, a faded photo of the Dry Creek volunteer team, including Travis and Samantha. Within a week, Samantha Lee was found dead in her apartment. No signs of forced entry. A single note on her kitchen counter. "He said we'd bring them home." No signature. Her phone showed one unsent draft email addressed to Mark Jennings. Subject line, "It's done." When Agent Pierce read the report, he sat in his car outside the penitentiary for nearly an hour before going in. He'd seen serial offenders before, manipulators, predators, control freaks. But Mark was something else. He wasn't just killing for power. He was writing a narrative, a story he needed others to live out. When Pierce finally walked back into the interview room, Mark looked up from the table, almost amused. "You've been busy," Pierce said. Mark smiled faintly. "You've been watching." Pierce placed a photo of Travis on the table. "He's dead." "I know," Mark said quietly. "He wanted to be found." Pierce slammed the table. "You made that happen!" Mark's expression stayed serene. "No. I showed them how." He leaned forward. "You still don't understand, Agent Pierce. The search was never about Evan, or Travis, or me." Pierce narrowed his eyes. "Then what was it about?" Mark's voice lowered to a whisper. "It's about what comes next." 2 days later, an anonymous email arrived at the FBI Nashville field office. It contained a single photo, taken deep in the Dry Creek woods at dusk. It showed a group of figures in orange vests, flashlights cutting through fog. The caption beneath read, "New volunteers have joined. The next search begins soon." That's when Pierce realized Mark had succeeded in the one thing every manipulator dreams of: outliving his own cage. Through belief, through imitation, through the hunger of those who needed purpose and found it in his darkness. The search hadn't ended. It had multiplied. When reporters finally asked Pierce what they should tell the public, he hesitated. Then he said, "Tell them not to volunteer for anything that doesn't feel right. Not every search party is looking for the missing. Some are looking for their next victim." And as he walked away, he glanced back toward the penitentiary, a flicker of orange light flashing through a cell window like a reflection of something still moving inside. Because Mark Jennings wasn't finished. Not yet. Somewhere beyond those walls, new maps were already being drawn, and new names were already being written. When the warden signed the transfer papers, he thought it was just another bureaucratic move, an inmate being relocated from minimum to full isolation. But to Special Agent Rowan Pierce, it was an act of containment, a desperate, final attempt to keep evil from spreading through the cracks. At 2:14 a.m. on August 5th, Mark Jennings was moved to Block E, a sub-level wing of the Tennessee State Penitentiary reserved for inmates under psychological monitoring. No mail, no contact, no television. His world was reduced to concrete, steel, and silence. The guard said he didn't resist. He just smiled. Pierce wasn't there for the transfer. He was in the Dry Creek woods again, standing where Travis Grant had been found, under a canopy of trees that muffled sound and swallowed light. The search tape was gone. The air was still. But the smell of wet earth and pine carried a memory that wouldn't leave. He crouched near the clearing, flashlight scanning the ground. He knew the FBI had collected every piece of evidence weeks ago, yet something pulled him back. He found it after 20 minutes, a fragment of laminated paper, half buried under a layer of leaves. When he brushed off the dirt, his pulse slowed. It was a torn section of a volunteer ID, just the edge where the photo would have been. But beneath the faded laminate, there were numbers carved into the plastic, small, deliberate coordinates. He typed them into his phone. They didn't point to Dry Creek. They pointed to Pine Hollow, the place where it had all begun. By morning, Pierce was on the road, rain hitting the windshield as Tennessee's back roads curled through the hills. The coordinates led him 20 miles beyond Pine Hollow, an abandoned ranger station at the edge of Lake Ashmore, a reservoir that had flooded decades earlier after a dam expansion. Locals said it was haunted. Fishermen avoided it. But when Pierce pulled up, he saw tire marks in the mud. Recent ones. Inside the cabin, the air smelled like mildew and old oil. The furniture was rotted, the roof half collapsed. But on the far wall, behind a rusted filing cabinet, Pierce saw something new. A set of maps, pinned up in careful rows. Each one was labeled with a name and a date. Evan Miller, Pine Hollow, 2019. Caleb Foster, Dry Creek, 2016. Travis Grant, 2024. And one more, written in red marker beneath the others. Rowan Pierce, Lake Ashmore. He stepped back, chest tightening. His flashlight beam trembled slightly across the paper. The ink was fresh. Within an hour, he had the entire cabin sealed off. Forensics teams descended, photographing every inch, cataloging every detail. What they found was worse than expected. Hidden beneath the floorboards were videotapes, 23 of them, each labeled with a different search operation. Pine Hollow, Bradley, Dry Creek. When agents played the first tape, the image flickered into focus. Shaky camcorder footage of volunteers combing the woods, laughing, calling out names. And then, a figure walking behind them, always just out of focus. Mark Jennings. He'd filmed his own searches, documenting his work, his control, his orchestration of hope and fear. But the last tape, unlabeled, was different. When they pressed play, there was no forest, no searchers, just a table lit by a single bulb, and Mark sitting in a chair, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this," he began, "you've figured out what I am." His voice was calm, low, deliberate, the same tone he'd used when speaking to victims' families. "I know you think this ends with me," he said, "but the truth is, it never began with me. It began with the feeling. When a town stops, when people listen, when everyone's eyes turn to the missing, that's the moment the world makes sense again. I just learned how to keep it that way." He leaned closer, eyes glinting. "Every search is a sermon, every disappearance a prayer, and every man who finds meaning in tragedy becomes part of something bigger." He smiled faintly. "You're part of it now, Agent Pierce. You started looking the moment you saw what I did. You'll keep looking. They always do." Then, slowly, he raised his hand, showing a small GPS tracker between his fingers. "This story doesn't stop when I do," he whispered. "The next one begins when you press play." The tape ended in static. The FBI sealed the footage under federal evidence control. Pierce filed an internal report, stating, "Subject demonstrates pathological orchestration of control and posthumous influence behavior, likely attempting ideological continuity through imitation and psychological contamination." In plainer terms, he was still infecting people, even from a concrete box. That week, Pierce returned to the penitentiary to confront him. The guards buzzed him through 2 steel doors, down a long corridor that smelled of bleach and rust. Mark was waiting at the table, hands folded, eyes calm. Pierce set a photograph on the table, the one from the cabin. Mark glanced at it. "Ah, you found my lake." Pierce's jaw tightened. "How many are there?" Mark shrugged. "Enough to make you wonder." "Why my name?" Mark smiled. "You're the only one still looking. The others stopped believing. But you," he tilted his head, "you believe something's still out there. That's how it spreads." Pierce stared at him, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. "You've been communicating with someone." "Who?" Mark didn't answer. Pierce leaned forward. "If you don't tell me, more people will die." Mark looked up, voice soft as a whisper. "That's the point." 3 days later, the penitentiary went into lockdown. A guard found a cell phone hidden behind a vent in Block E. It contained one message, unsent, time-stamped for 3:17 a.m. "The next search begins at the lake. Follow the coordinates." Below it, an attached image, a photo of the Lake Ashmore cabin, taken from the outside. The timestamp was after the site had been sealed by the FBI, which meant someone else had been there. Someone who wasn't supposed to know it existed. That night, Pierce couldn't sleep. He replayed the video over and over, the tape of Mark, the quiet smile, the promise that it wouldn't end. He sat in his car outside his apartment, rain tapping on the windshield, wondering if the line between investigator and participant had blurred. His phone buzzed. A new email. No subject, no sender. Inside was a single attachment, an image of a flashlight beam cutting through trees. The caption beneath read, "Welcome to the search." The following morning, a local news alert hit the wire. 2 hikers reported missing near Lake Ashmore. Both were volunteers from a university criminal justice program, students who'd written essays on the Jennings case. One of them had posted a photo the night before on the Trail of Truth. Under it, a comment from an anonymous user: "Keep searching, you're closer than you think." By the end of that week, the entire area around Lake Ashmore was locked down. Drones scanned for heat signatures, but fog kept rolling off the reservoir like breath from something sleeping below. Divers swept the lake. Nothing surfaced. But near the shoreline, beneath a cluster of cypress trees, they found footprints. Size 11 boots, military tread pattern, leading from the waterline to the ranger cabin. Only 1 pair in. None out. The FBI reinstated Pierce to field command. He didn't want it, but he couldn't walk away. He ordered a search perimeter, a phrase that felt like poison now. This time, there were no volunteers. Only agents. Only professionals. But as they combed through the swampy ground, one of the searchers called out, voice trembling. "Agent Pierce, you need to see this!" He followed the beam of a flashlight toward a tree. Something was carved into the bark, faint but deliberate. 6 words. "Every search needs a beginning." The same phrase from Mark's cell. Only this carving was fresh. The bark still bled sap. Pierce's hand shook as he reached toward it, because beneath the carved letters, there were initials. Small, ragged, and unmistakable. RP his own. They pulled him from the site after that. Psych evaluation, mandatory leave. The Bureau said he was too close to the subject matter. But Pierce knew the truth. Mark hadn't escaped his prison. He'd escaped through him, through the story, through the belief. Every person who looked at the case, who whispered about it, who tried to understand it, became part of the search, and the search never ended. Months later, a podcast about the Jennings case went viral. Millions of listeners tuned in. Amateur sleuths flocked to Pine Hollow, to Dry Creek, to Lake Ashmore. Some claimed to see shapes in the trees, flashes of orange vests, phantom lights along the shore. Online forums tracked missing hikers. A few users began referring to themselves as the new volunteers. One post from an unverified account read, "If you want to find them, join us." Attached was a familiar logo. White lettering over navy blue, Pine Hollow Volunteer Search and Rescue, Reborn. When Pierce heard the news, he drove back to the penitentiary one last time. Mark was gone, not escaped, dead. Heart failure in his sleep, according to the medical examiner. But on the cell wall, scratched into the paint, were 3 words that looked almost like a farewell. You kept looking. At the funeral, only one reporter showed up. No family, no mourners. Just a gray sky, a pine casket, and the quiet shuffle of dirt. Pierce watched from a distance, rain dripping off his coat. As the workers finished, one of them looked up. "Strange thing," he said. "Couple of people already came by earlier. Left this." He held up a folded flyer, damp from the rain. Across the top, in red marker, were the words, "Community Search, Lake Ashmore, Saturday, 7 p.m. At the bottom, scribbled in the corner, "Led by new volunteers. Everyone welcome." That night, Pierce sat alone in his apartment, the flyer on the table beside him. He poured a drink, turned off the lights, and listened to the rain against the glass. He told himself he wouldn't go, that it wasn't his responsibility anymore. But as midnight neared, he found himself driving down the same back roads, past the same fog, toward the same water. And when he stepped out of the car, flashlight in hand, he saw them. Figures in orange vests, lined up along the tree line, waiting. None of them spoke. None of them moved. Just the soft rustle of rain and the glint of light on their badges. As Pierce raised his flashlight, one of them turned toward him and whispered, "We've been waiting for you." The next morning, his car was found parked near the lake. Engine off, door open, no sign of struggle. Just his badge lying on the driver's seat, and on the windshield, written in the condensation, "Every search needs a beginning." If you liked this story, please subscribe to the channel for more true crime mysteries.